want to spend some time now making sure that we understand how effective rules work when it comes to IP filtering in regards to using NSGs or ASGs, network security groups, or application security groups. Now, as you can see in the drawing here, this as a whole is kind of representing the Azure environment. And in our Azure environment, we're going to say that we've got this VNet here, which is the 10.100/16 address space. That's roughly 65,000-ish addresses. And then we've got a subnet on that that I've just called subnet, and it's 10.1.1.0, and it's /24. That means we've basically taken this 65,000 range and we've broken it up into a range of about 250. It's supposed to be 256, but you got to subtract 2, and then Azure uses some of them, so you get 250, 251 addresses available to you. Okay, this is a virtual machine that has been booted up on this subnet, maybe running Windows or Linux, whatever, and it has a virtual NIC on it, and that virtual NIC, of course, can communicate with services that are in Azure. That virtual NIC can also communicate with the internet going outbound if we want. Okay, so we can allow outbound internet because Azure supports network address translation, NAT, which means it can allow private addresses to talk to the internet. Now, if you want to allow the ability for traffic to come back in, if you want, let's say, people out on the internet or services out on the internet, like this box right here, to be able to interact with that VM, there's various ways you can do it. One of the most basic ways you could do it would be to assign a public IP address, right? So I can use a PIP, all right, public IP address. And at that point, traffic, if we assigned that public address to this VM, then that means traffic could flow into this VM based on a public address, which will say the public address is 687692.12, which I just, pulling that number out of thin air. Okay, that means that people could hit that service from the internet, and we could even, with the help of DNS, we could even register a name to that. So if this was like a web server or something, then I could say, www.examlabpractice.com if I wanted. Now, you can do all of that, and I'm not really getting into the Azure firewall stuff in this video. I would like to say, though, that there are better approaches to this than just to expose a VM like that just directly to the internet and expect an NSG or ASG filter rules to handle the security of it. Microsoft recommends using an Azure firewall, and if you implement an Azure firewall, then what you would do is you would have the public IP address coming into the Azure firewall and the translation from there. So you'd have traffic hitting the firewall. It would have to successfully make it through the firewall, and then the firewall could forward it to your web service if you wanted. Okay, but just for the sake of helping you understand filter rules, because really we're not getting into Azure firewall stuff. We're just trying to understand how effective rules work with these security group features. Okay. So the next question would be, where, if I'm going to implement filtering and I'm going to filter, certain types of traffic coming in or going out, how do I do that? Well, again, NSG, ASG. If I'm with an NSG, let's just create an NSG here. All right. So this little box is going to represent an NSG. I can place that NSG in one of two places. I can place it on a subnet. I can't put it on the whole entire VNet, but I can put it on individual subnets, in which at that point it will be able to police traffic flowing into anything that flows in or out of that subnet. Okay. Another option would be to place it directly on a VNIC. Okay. And at that point I could have rules that are affecting traffic flowing in and out of that VNIC. Now, with an ASG, I can place it directly on the VM, and it'll police all NICs. However many NICs you got, virtual NICs, if you're using multiple NICs and you team them together, it'll work with all those. But traditionally, most people, my experience has been most people are using NSGs more than ASGs. But you do have ASGs available. You could use to police an entire VM and all of its NICs if you want. And that ASG could also be assigned to other virtual machines as well if you want. But anyway, so from there we have this. This is our rules, right? And this is inbound, but you have one of these for outbound as well. Inbound is the one most everybody kind of focuses on, and that's what I want to look at with you right now. I have various rules here. The first rule that I've got is this. It says priority 100, and it says allow RDP on port 3389. That's remote desktop. That's what lets you remote into a virtual machine. The TCP protocol, and you're saying source any, destination any. So it doesn't matter who it is out on the internet that wants to communicate with this virtual machine on port 3389. It is saying you are going to allow them. Now, granted, when I say you're going to allow them, they still have to, have credentials to log on to this virtual machine on port 3389. But anybody can hit this machine across the internet on 3389. Okay, and then the destination, well, is any. So what this NSG is saying is it doesn't matter wherever this NSG is attached, or this NSG, whichever one you're looking at, it's going to allow it. Okay, it's going to allow it, source and destination, for anybody. Okay, so that is how that's going to work. All right. Now, to understand effective rules, it's important to understand these priorities. You'll notice that the lower the number, the higher the priority. So these other rules that we've got here have lower priority over this first rule, okay? And the way that the rules work is the first rule that applies to you is the one you get. It does not go any further than that. So my point in that is, let's move this down a little bit. If I were to create another rule, all right, this right here, and I were to say, let's just say deny. Let's pull this down. All right. This deny rule, and let's give it, we'll say a priority of, we'll say 101. All right. So priority of 101, and let's just set the font to that right there. Okay. So that means that it's going to be below. Let's try that again. There we go. It's going to be below the top one as far as priority goes. So a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, isn't it most restrictive?" No, it is not most restrictive. It is the first rule that applies to you is the one you get. So if you were connecting, if this was you and you were connecting in using this public IP address on port 3389, you would be allowed. You would never be denied. Now, on the flip side, if you flipped these two, okay, so let's move this right here, and then let's move this down, all right, and so now the top one is deny, okay, now we got a problem. You're never allowing RDP at that point. You will never get to this. So a lot of people might say, well, what if I only wanted to, what if this guy right here is an admin, okay? Let's say that this person that's sitting at this computer is an admin, and he has an address, he or she has an address of, I don't know, we'll just make up an IP address, 57.67.34.2, okay? And you just wanted to allow that admin, and that admin always has that address, okay? So let's say that's the case. So let's just copy that address. Okay, so at that point, where would I put it? Would I put it under source or destination? Well, I would put it under source, right? That's where it's coming from. This is an inbound rule. So if I'm wanting to allow that admin, I would put it right here. But is that going to make any difference? Is the admin going to be allowed at this point? Well, if you said no to that, you're correct. They are not going to be allowed right now because this deny rule is denying them. So this, you would not want to have this deny everybody rule above the above this allow rule. All right. Now, it also, if you have this allow rule this way, it also doesn't really even make sense, because you might say, well, what if I want to deny everybody else? What if I want to deny everybody else? Okay. So if you wanted to deny everybody else, wouldn't it make sense just to, let's move this here, we'll move this over here, we'll move this one down. Would it make sense just to flip these? All right. And now you're denying everybody else. Well, you didn't really accomplish much. And let me tell you why you didn't accomplish much. Because you will deny everybody else, but you would have denied everybody else if this rule did not exist. Let's take this rule out. Okay, pretend like that rule is just gone, like it's not there. All right. Somebody connects in that does not have this address, this 576734.2. Well, this rule would not apply to them for port 3389. So then you know what Azure does? The NSG is going to do, or ASG is going to go to the next rule down, which would be this one. Does this rule apply to the person? No. Does this rule apply to the person? No. Does this rule? Well, this rule basically applies to everything. So essentially, if none of these first 4 rules apply to you, then you get what we call the default deny policy, or default deny rule, which is deny everybody. And they also sometimes refer to that as an implicit deny. So a lot of times people then ask the question, well, wouldn't I then, would I never use deny then? Because it seems to me like if you've already got this default deny, you would only ever use allow rules. And the answer to that question is yes, you will still use deny in certain circumstances. And it's when you want to explicitly deny something. Okay? When you want to explicitly deny something. All right? So let's say that you are wanting to deny RDP for a specific, well, let's say you just want to deny a specific range of addresses for RDP. You're going to, let's change this back. Okay, I'm going to put this back to any. Okay, so it's no longer going to be just the admin. We're going to say any. But we want to block a certain range of addresses. Okay, maybe we've got a situation where we have got some hackers. All right, let's just make some hackers here. We'll say that this is going to be our little hacker. Okay, devil horn, devil tail, mean look on his face here, some fangs. Got to have some good fangs if you're going to be a hacker, right? Okay, not really, but okay. So let's take our hacker. Okay, here's our hacker, or hackers, and maybe there is a range of addresses on the internet that start with, they're located in some other country. I'm not going to point out any specific country, maybe just some country out there in the world, and there is no reason in the world that these people, maybe this whole ISP is just full of hackers, and you've discovered what the range of addresses are that they're using. So maybe they are addresses that start with 34.78.x.x. The x's being whatever comes after. It could be any range of addresses. Maybe you've done a lot of logging and you've discovered these addresses and you know what they are. You could actually go and you can block that. All right, you could say 34.78.0.0 actually, and the 00 can act as wildcards. All right, and you can apply that in your source. All right, and that would basically, you could basically then, you are now explicitly denying, but you're only explicitly denying people that start with that address. All right, now I also want to point out that that is one way you can explicitly deny things. And so the idea here, though, is that if you really want to get down and dirty with stopping hackers, that's where you get into the Azure firewall. But not talking about that a whole lot here. I just wanted to throw it out there. But the thing I want to clarify here now is that if somebody tried to connect in, this rule would get checked against. So let's say one of the hackers tries to connect in. They start out with that address. This rule is going to get checked first. Okay, this rule would not apply to them. I'm sorry, this rule would apply to them, and that's a problem. That's an issue, because if they're trying to connect in through 3389, do they fall into the category of any? Yes, they do. So this rule would not affect them right now. So we would want to switch that, right? We would want to switch that. And let's just say we're flipping these. Hold on. And we'll move the allow down and the deny up. Now we would be able to block the hackers. All right? Because they would connect in, it would hit this address or this rule. This rule would apply to them, and it wouldn't go any further. So this is when this is called an explicit deny, whereas this default deny, we call that an implicit deny, when you want to explicitly deny something. So yes, there is reasons why you might want to deny something, but if you are going to ever explicitly deny something, you want to make sure that your explicit rule is always above any explicit deny rule is always above any allow rules that might conflict with it. Okay, that's the important thing. If there's any kind of a conflict, you want to make sure the deny is always above the allow if there's a conflict. All right, if you're explicitly denying something. All right, so hopefully that now helps you get a much better understanding of how effective rules work in the different security groups that we have in Azure. Hey, this is John Christopher. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I want you to know that I'm trying really hard to grow this channel, so I hope you'll give me a like and a subscribe. Also, if you'll check the description in this video, I've got a link for you that can show you how you can get access to all my different courses. I have lots of different Microsoft certification courses that'll help you pass your exam. All right, thanks a lot for watching the video, and I hope to see you again.